the 23rd, 1997. We're going to interview Dr. Louis Levy's wife and get the history of her family here in Fort Worth, Texas. Miss Levy, when were you born?
October the 4th, 1916.
Here in Fort Worth?
In Fort Worth.
And Dr. Levy?
Dr. Levy was born here in Fort Worth, August the 21st, 1913.
And he was born in Fort Worth also?
Fort Worth, yes.
And what were his parents' names?
Celine Hayes Levy and Ben M. Levy.
And I forgot to ask you your parents' name.
Ethel Rosen Mehl and B. Max Mehl.
Okay. Where were your parents born?
My father was born in Kovna, which was Russia at that time. Later on it was Lithuania, and then they moved to Punavas in Lithuania. And my mother was born in Dallas, and then they moved to Fort Worth. And when her mother passed away, the whole family moved to Philadelphia, and that's where she grew up. And my grandfather married again, had another whole family. Her mother is buried, one of the first people buried at the Hebrew Rest Cemetery over on Main Street. That's when it was way out in the country.
How did your mother
Father
meet?
Okay. When my mother was about 18, she came to Fort Worth to visit her uncle, Sam Rosen, who lived here on the north side. And she met my father at the synagogue on one of the holidays, the old synagogue downtown.
On Taylor Street?
On Taylor Street.
Okay.
And then a couple of years later, they were married. They were married in 1907.
In the synagogue, I'm assuming.
No, they married at Sam Rosen's house.
They did.
On the north side.
How many brothers and sisters did you have?
Only one sister, Lorraine Mel Rosenberg, who lives in Chicago and has lived in Chicago the past 60 years when she married, and she's still there.
She's still in the 5 minutes.
He was very, very interested in history, and he dropped out of school in about the 6th grade because his brothers needed him in their clothing store on Main Street in downtown Fort Worth. And he had a little table in the back of the store where he messed with coins, and that's how he learned history, through coins. And he just loved it, and he bought a few coins, and then he found out he could sell them and make a little money, so that's what he did.
Abe Mel and Ian Mel were actually your uncles.
That's right.
They were in the clothing business.
That's right.
Was Myra Mel also in the clothing business?
Off and on. Myra Mel, he traveled around a lot, and he didn't marry until, I'm sure he was in his 40s when he married. He married Ruby Gernsbacher from Weatherford. And
excuse me, is that the same Gernsbacher family, Fort Worth?
They're all related.
Okay, fine.
Yeah, they're all related.
As a child, where did you live? What part of Fort Worth?
I was born and raised, we lived there until I was about 8 years old, 1124 South Henderson Street.
1124 South Henderson Street.
South Henderson Street, okay. Just a block off Magnolia.
Okay, yeah.
And in fact, they just tore that house down. My mother and father built that house when they first got married in 1907. And they just tore that house down just last year. And we lived there until 1926. And then they built a house at 2512 South Adams, just off of Elizabeth Boulevard. And that's where they lived. No, they lived there until about 1947, and they built a smaller house over on Wilshire and lived there until they passed away.
Do you recall the schools you went to here in Fort Worth?
Oh, sure.
Which elementary school did you go to?
Well, I went first to 8th Ward, and
tell me the approximate year that you went to 8th Ward.
8th Ward? Well, I started in kindergarten, which would be around the early 20s. And then when we moved, I went to Ian Daggett And
I'm glad you went to both those schools.
well, okay, and then, well, the 8th ward was Days of Olive School.
Right.
And then I went to Central High School
That's
when
wow.
Mr. Pasco was the principal. In fact, the year I graduated, he retired. I always said he couldn't stand any more of it after I graduated. And then, they moved the school and named it R.L. Pasco High School.
This is a very long shot question. Do you recall by any chance who was the principal of the Days of Olive?
Now that I don't remember.
Would have been Mr.
I can
Moore.
tell you my teachers, but I can't tell you the
Do you
principal.
recall who your first grade teacher was?
My first grade teacher was Miss Laura, and my second grade teacher was Miss Lottie Holland.
Oh, I had her.
Okay, everybody had Miss Lottie Holland, and my mother used to laugh because she always told everybody she was 39 years
She
old.
was a queen.
She was wonderful.
Wonderful person.
Her picture was in the paper, a number of years back. She had her 100th birthday.
She was a doll.
Yes. And let's see. Then the third grade teacher was Miss Maddie. And the only thing I remember about her was she was very, very cross-eyed. And that worried me no end.
Did you ever have a teacher by the name of Purcell? Alice Purcell at
At Dagny?
Days of Olive?
No.
Or Miss Annie Moore?
I had Annie Moore. That's who Miss Annie Moore. Now, wasn't she the
First
one
grade.
First grade? Well, maybe
She
maybe
was,
that's
She was like a real witch. W-I-T-C-H, but that's what I was pronouncing.
I really don't recall my first grade teacher at all. I just remember Miss Holland and the third grade teacher that was very, very cross-eyed.
There was Miss Charlton there at
I remember that name,
That's
but I don't
Days of
think I
Olive,
ever
right.
had. I don't think I
and Mr.
had.
Moore was principal. I don't know if it's the same principal you had.
Well, now, Mr. Moore was the superintendent of schools later on, wasn't he?
Could have
I
been.
think
Could have
so.
been.
I think so.
From there you went to Daggett.
To Daggett. And O.D. Wyatt was the principal at Daggett.
O.D. Wyatt was? I
O.D.
didn't know
Wyatt was the principal at Daggett when I was there. And then I went to Central, and then I don't know when he became principal of Pasco.
Well, he must have gone to the north side from Daggett.
Was he?
Then to Pasco.
Okay.
Because he was principal at
Of
Pasco
north
when I
side.
was going there.
Okay.
He was a very well-liked man.
Oh, yes. When my children were there, just before he passed away.
The mode, what type of transportation did your parents use?
Well, my father had a Franklin. Do you remember the old
Sure.
Franklin cars? I think it was the only one in the city of Fort Worth.
Very cool.
And that particular car is still out at the Pate Museum.
No kidding.
I saw it out there, and I know it's his car because I recognize some of the things on the inside of it.
That's nice.
Yeah, and there just weren't very many of those cars. It had an air-cooled motor.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
No.
He didn't go. He had Fort Worth at all.
No.
How did
You know, did they have Hebrew school then?
I can't say.
They didn't at the temple. Now, we were just members of
Your father, did he belong to the synagogue? Or you know.
He belonged to the synagogue, but the children, I was confirmed at Bethel, and Lewis was confirmed at Bethel, but he used to go to the synagogue. After his father died, he went every morning and said Kaddish for his father. For a year, anyway.
That's right.
And, but we used to go to the synagogue when it was on Taylor Street.
Okay.
But then after that, we just didn't. My grandfather, he lived at the synagogue.
How did it come about that, and I'm actually strictly for information, that your two uncles, Abe and Meyer, used more of the synagogue's facilities than your father?
My father was more in the, in the community. He did a lot in the community, other than the Jewish community.
Okay.
You see what I mean?
Yeah, sure.
Although he was very interested in the Jewish community and had many friends there. But he, in his business, he met so many people, and he became interested. But his father practically disowned him when he joined the temple.
That sounds familiar.
Yes, his father called him Freifa Goyim.
That's right. That's terrible, but I am familiar with that. All right. didn't go to any Hebrew school at all.
No.
Did you call some of your Sunday school teachers? Who was rabbi at the temple?
Rabbi Murfield, Harry Murfield.
Okay. Who were
Yes.
some of your teachers there? Do you call them?
Teachers, Miss Rosenstein, she taught everybody.
I remember her.
Yep,
Sure.
she was wonderful. But outside of that, I don't remember the teachers.
Okay.
Oh, Selma Bryn. You remember Selma Bryn?
No.
Okay, she died a number of years back.
That I don't.
See, you're too young.
Yes. Gee whiz. Were you active in any of the temple organizations?
Oh yeah, the sisterhood, and the council. In my younger days, now I'm not very active in much of anything.
Now you had 2 children, right?
3.
3?
Mhm.
And who were they?
Rosalind Rubin
Roz, I know.
and Louis J. Levy Jr., who is an orthopedic surgeon. He practices in San Diego.
I don't know him.
And Max Levy, who's an architect in Dallas.
Don't know him.
Well, he had a beautiful write-up in the Dallas Morning News not long ago. I have a copy of it.
I've never knew any of your kids except for Roz.
Okay. Well, after they went to college, then that was it. They didn't come back to Fort Worth. Lou, when he finished his training, went into the Navy, and the Navy sent him to San Diego. And he was married, had 2 children. San Diego was so gorgeous, and he had always planned to come back here and go into practice with his father. But it was so beautiful, and the public schools in San Diego were wonderful. And so we told him, if your family's happy there and you're happy, stay, and he did. And it was the most wonderful thing, really, for them.
Oh, good. Good.
Mhm.
Good.
And it was a nice place for us to visit.
Wasn't there a TV program that was on once? That was a story that more or less highlighted Dr. Levy, the case Dr. Levy had.
Oh, yes, uh-huh,
It
uh-huh.
was on television.
Yeah, I think so.
I thought I recalled that.
Yeah, it had to do with a man who had terrible curvature of the spine.
Okay.
And he had, for years, the only thing he could see were people's feet because he was all bent over. And Louis straightened him out. And I used to have newspaper clippings about that. Now, I didn't come across those.
I know that program.
And then they did a whole program on it.
Okay, now your family and the Dr. Levy's family are all buried here in Fort Worth then?
Yes, his father and mother and grandparents are all Hebrew Rest. You know, the old cemetery. My grandmother, that's my mother's mother, and my mother's brother, Maurice Rosen, and Jacob Rosen, who is my great-grandfather, are buried there. He came over here he came to Fort Worth just to visit in 1902, and he died here, and they buried him in Hebrew Rest.
When you were a child?
I walked.
You walked?
Uh-huh. We lived just a few blocks from Daggett. But then when I went to Pasco High School, or Central High School, my daddy took me every morning, and I think I rode the streetcar home. My mother never did drive a car. Cars came after, and she never drove a car.
Did the temple have any youth dances or programs or parties when you were a child?
They had programs, but I don't remember dances or anything like that.
And again, strictly from the point of history, there was not much intermixing between the temple and the synagogue at that time as far as young people.
No, I knew all the people from the synagogue, the young people, older people. That's how I knew your family.
Okay,
Because we would go to the synagogue every Rosh Hashanah on the second day.
Okay.
Yeah. The first day we'd go to the temple, second day we'd go to the synagogue, because my grandfather was there. And as I say, after the synagogue moved from Taylor, I don't remember ever going. He went to TCU for 2 years, and then he transferred to the University of Texas at Austin, and then he went to Galveston to medical school. And then he went for his 2 years of training at Michael Reese Hospital in Chicago. That's where Rosalind was born. And then we went out to California to LA County. He had an orthopedic residency there for a couple of years, and then he came back to Scottish Rite Hospital in Dallas for children's orthopedics. And then he went into the service and spent 3 years overseas, North Africa, Corsica, and Italy.
So he actually started his practice after World War II then?
He barely got started before World War II because he had been waiting so long, and he opened an office for about 6 months before he went into the service. He knew he was going to go into the service, but he went practice for about 6 months here. Then when he came back, he couldn't find office space, and through the goodness of I'm trying to think of the doctor's name, Walker. Dr. Walker had just a small little room in conjunction with his office, and he let Lewis have it. And Lewis put up a curtain in between a few little chairs for a waiting room and so forth. And as soon as another space came open, they let him have it in the medical arts building. No, they didn't save any space for any of the doctors. None of the doctors could find office space when they came back.
So he was with a group of other doctors, you might say, during all of his practice?
No, he started single practice.
Oh, he did, okay.
In fact, he practiced alone, well, let's see, about 10 years before Dr. Lipscomb came in, and then Dr. McDonald, and so forth, on down the line.
How old are your children?
Well, now let's see. Rosalind was born in 1938. She was 58 or 59 this year. I can't keep up with them once they get past 20.
When she was born in 58.
She was born in January 58.
Yeah,
Lou had his 50th birthday this year, and my youngest son, Max, was 49. See, Rosalind was born before World War II, and then the two boys were born after World War II, 14 months apart. We had a well-planned family. 8.5 years, and then...
No comment. We did too.
Yeah, there were a lot of those, that kind of back
then. The same thing.
See, Lewis and I were married. I graduated from high school on a Wednesday, and the following Wednesday we got married. And as he always said, I was very smart. I skipped from high school to medical school, the second year medical school. I just skipped everything else.
Do you recall, I'm kind of jumping helter-skelter
right.
with you,
Mm-hmm.
as a child, what games did you kids at that time play?
Mainly baseball.
Kick the can or anything like that?
I never played kick the can. I caught lightning bugs and played baseball.
That was it.
That was it. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Because we used to go to every baseball game. Both my mother and father
No kidding.
were big sports fans, and I still am. Not necessarily baseball, but I adore football, basketball, and I'm a big supporter of the TCU teams. I've always gone to those games. And in fact, I even went to the TCU games, football games, when nobody else would go. But and Lewis always took care of all the injuries of the football players. Someone once asked me, how do you get an appointment with your husband? I said, well, play football and get hurt and you can walk right in. Because he always took care of all the football players and any of the injuries, the collegiate injuries, and high school too.
Well, I think we're getting almost to the end of the Pearl interview.
Okay.
You have been delightful answering all these questions.
Well, I'm happy. I'm very happy. Anything I can
It's been very,
recall.
very interesting.
You wouldn't remember. My mother and I and Lorraine, my sister, would ride the streetcar all the way out to LaGrave Field, and then my daddy would meet us out there and drive us home after the game. But see, the games were played in the afternoon.
Yeah.
But we went that was the coolest place in town. There was no air conditioning. And so that was the very coolest place. And that's what we did all the time. And my mother, until the day she died, she could name you every baseball player on every major league team.
That's unusual.
She listened to the games. She watched them when she finally got a television set, and when they had them on, she could tell you every one.
That's grand.
Now I'm not that big on baseball, but I can tell you a lot about football if you want to know it.
That was grand. That's nice.
Excuse me.
Sure.
Okay. All right. Now let's see. Here's Mrs. Colton right there. That's Esther Colton.
Okay.
But then this is Amanda, who married Esther's son. Dave Colton's not in this picture. And then here's Louis. And this is Regina Colton. And this is J.B. Colton, and his grandmother is hanging on to him because he was a holy terror.
This family was pretty well disseminated by the time I
yeah.
aware of what was happening.
Uh-huh,
But I do remember the name.
Okay.
Do me a favor, describe this picture to us again, if you would.
Well, I really don't know too much about this picture. I know it was an organization from the synagogue of these men. They formed some sort of, now Zelda can tell you, but I didn't write down here what it is. I just wrote down.
Well, I really think these are past presidents of the synagogue.
You think so?
I really do. I know this is Mr. Scottsy.
Yeah,
He
and
was,
Ian Mel was
he
quite
was.
active.
Mr. Shamlin was.
Oh yes, L.F. Shamlin.
And-
It upset me very much. See, that was my husband's uncle. He
Yeah.
was married to one of the Levy girls,
Yeah.
to Sarah. But when they changed the name of the B'nai B'rith Lodge to the Isidore Garcic Lodge, because they said nobody could remember Mr. Shamlin.
That's a bunch of nonsense.
Well, and I think that's just terrible
Yes,
that
it's
they
a
would
bunch
do
of
that.
nonsense.
Yes,
This
and
is,
then that's another Shamlin.
yeah, I remember him
now,
well, too.
They were, I don't
He
know if he
was-
was an uncle. They weren't brothers.
he was ultra orthodox and a big worker in the synagogue.
Oh yes,
I remember that
yes,
well. That's Mr. Goldstein.
Right, Jake Goldstein.
And this is God, I can't.
No, that's Ginsburg.
That's right, Ginsburg.
That's
This is Salzburg,
yeah, that's Ian Ginsburg,
Yes.
I believe.
and that's Mr. Rosenthal.
Right.
And this is something I don't know.
Well, I told you that's Zelda's father.
Oh.
The date was February the 5th, 1949.
Oh, that's when,
15 cents. The magazine cost 15 cents.
and that was the article by Dr. Levy.
No, about my father,
Oh,
Big
okay.
Max Mel.
Okay.
Let's see. There's that picture. And then the whole article about where he was born and how he came about doing the whole thing and everything.
These
It
are
was, it's very
reprises.
interesting.
just grand.
If you'd like to take it and read it, you can.
Well, I would like to take them all and make copies of them, but
Well, look, I was going to show you some of this stuff. Well, this is my mother's book. But this, my father, thousands of pictures. Oh, and this is wonderful. This is a picture taken at a picnic back in 1903
where was that taken at, do you know?
here in Fort Worth.
But I mean,
somewhere.
what-
No,
at
I don't
park
know
or
that they
at
had a
amusement
picnic. I don't know. They had a picnic, but there's my father. And that woman is Mrs. Goldstein's sister, Jake Goldstein's wife's sister.
No, that's not the one you used to call Aunt Becky.
No. Where is the Colton picture? Here, this is Aunt Becky Goldstein right there. That's
Yes,
Becky.
it is.
Mm-hmm.
We see her walking down the corridor of the synagogue, we'd run.
Why?
Oh, she was the Holy Terror.
No.
Really? Was it
Not
kids?
Aunt Becky, no.
We were terrified of
Do you
her.
remember Mr. Horn at
Yeah.
the Hebrew Institute?
Yeah, sure.
Now
He was too.
I was scared to death of
He was
Mr.
too.
Horn. Is
Big
that
long
black
beard,
beard?
yes.
Well, he's back there in that picture of Lewis's wrist.
True.
Uh-huh. But, no, Aunt Becky somehow was related to the Coltons, but I'm not sure
He
how.
lived on Hemphill Street.
Well, that's where the Coltons live. This house is on Hemphill Street. It's not there anymore, but that's
remember
where
that
this
big
picture was
two-story house.
taken. Yeah.
Remember
I'm just going to show you all the things. This is all pictures of my father. And, I mean, it just goes on and on and on. But they took,
You've done something very few people do,
uh-huh.
is see pictures and date.
Well,
That's
I
very
learned that putting the names and dates on all pictures when they had the sesquicentennial here, and they were for the Jewish history, and they stress that. And see, now this, did you know Albert Mickenthal lived in Dallas?
No.
That was my father's very best friend, and they did everything together. And
I can remember the beard being silver white.
no, I knew him when his beard was black, and that's what was so frightening. He was really a young man then.
Yeah.
He just looked older. But this is...
Describe it if you want. Okay.
No, it is a picture of Louis Levy's bris on Pennsylvania Avenue. And
Is that close to Harris Hospital where it's at now, or close to Hemphill Street?
it closer to Hemphill Street.
Okay.
Remember where Fuquay's
Sure,
used to be?
sure, yeah.
Okay, it was just 2 doors from Fuquay's off Hemphill Street. And let's see, that's B. Max Mehl, and that's Isaac Mehl, and Rabbi Blumenthal, and Mr. Salzberg, and William Hayes. That was Lewis's grandfather from Weatherford. And here is, do you remember Meredith Carb?
Yes, yes.
Okay, there's Meredith. And this is Will Friedman.
Yeah.
And there's Max Gilbert.
He used to have scars and stuff like that at the store.
Oh,
A lot of them over there. Foxy's did.
No, this is the only copy of this picture I have, and before I just had it reframed not too long ago, and I'm sorry I didn't have some copies made of it. Because,
The pictures just fabulous, all of them.
yeah.
You
Well,
had some, did you get this?
see, all these,
Your father's
now,
picture.
that little map up there, my son picked that up. There was a thing at the Smithsonian Institute about my father. It was in the history section, and he brought me the map. He was there and brought me the map to show me exactly where it was. And if I can get over there, I'll read you the inscription.
Okay.
Yeah,
I
go
don't
ahead.
want to walk in front of me. What they had there was, it said, B. Max Mehl, born in Russia, Mehl established his coin firm in Fort Worth, Texas, which soon became the center of one of the most successful coin businesses in America. Mehl was indeed the dean of U.S. coin business in the early 20th century. This exhibit that they have there has to do with outstanding people of the 20th century, early 20th
Yeah.
century. But in 1915, the year before I was born, he picked up his family and they moved to New York City because everyone had told him he could never make a business of what he wanted to do here in Fort Worth, Texas. So they moved to New York. They lived there for 2 months. They came back, and he said he'd rather starve in Texas than do well in New York.
That's cute.
And they lived here ever since.
When did Mr. Mehl die?
In 1957, September 28th, I think, 1957.
For some reason, I can't remember your father at all.
Well,
I don't know why. The other ones, yes, but not him. You got some pictures back there on the...
house they built, they moved in 1926. That was my father's dream castle. He'd always dreamt of having a beautiful home.
And what kind of business was your father in?
Coins.
I was thinking, I was
You're-
thinking of Dr. Levy.
Yeah, well, no, Lewis's father, he worked for the Star-Telegram. It wasn't called the Record then, the
Okay.
newspaper, I think when they first got married. And then he and Al Levy had the jewelry store, and Harry Gressman worked for them.
Okay, Gressman's, I remember.
Yeah, okay.
He had a pipe, I'm not thinking Letterman, okay.
Yeah, that,
Okay.
You're getting your,
I'm getting a little bit,
yeah, Anyway,
he's probably his son, he's about
No.
the same age I am.
yeah, Arthur Gressman is the
Okay.
son of the one who worked for, that's, is it LJ? I mean, anyway, the Gilberts. And here, wait a minute, I've got it all back here. Levy, Al and Ben were younger, and the girls were all older. And let's see, who else? Then the children, in Louis Levy's lap is Julie Gilbert. And he died, I've forgotten when. But then also on the ground is Dave Colton, Reba Gilbert, and Joseph Colton. And Joseph Colton died very young too.